Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Datola, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Inside Dentistry's Product Talk. We are on location in Monroe, North Carolina, in the office of Dr. Leonard Hess. Lenny is a senior faculty member at the Dawson Academy and an Inside Dentistry board member, and we're here today to discuss the Shofu EyeSpecial C3 camera. Lenny, thank you so much for introducing us and bringing us into your office today.
Yeah, thank you.
Shofu has a product in almost every category. They've got abrasives, they have cements, they have restorative materials, they have ceramics. But I think one of the more impressive things they've done is taken kind of a common object, the camera, and redesigned it from the ground up to make it be for specifically dental use and dental use only. And I know that a lot of dentists are camera phobic. I know you teach them how to use cameras. And I think that the EyeSpecial C3 is the perfect camera for the camera phobic dentist who might be out there. What do you think about this camera as a way to kind of dip your toe into the dental photography market?
Well, Mike, photography is so important in dentistry, not only from a marketing standpoint, but also from documentation and also from treatment planning. Taking certain very specific photographs is absolutely critical if you're going to be able to treatment plan correctly. And one of the problems that we faced in dentistry is that we've always been kind of handcuffed by SLR cameras, which are large, they're bulky, they're heavy. And so what's happened over time is a lot of companies have tried to take cameras and try to retrofit them for dental usage. And it just doesn't work. You know, the flashes don't work correctly. You get shadows where you don't want shadows, or more importantly, you get framing that is inconsistent. So if you're going to take a photograph, you want the before and the after. You want the teeth to be the exact same size in proportion in every photograph that you take. And if you don't have a lens that's capable of focusing at a specific focal length, what you're going to get is inconsistency in your photography. And so that's always one of the challenges that we faced. So the great thing about this Shofu product is that this is the first and I think the only camera in our industry that was designed to be used by dentists. So a lot of the problems that we've faced with smaller, more easy to use cameras have been completely solved by this camera, simply with the intention that they had in the design of it.
Yeah, because it's taking a regular camera and then trying to get around those limitations to make it work for dental, as opposed to sitting down with a blank piece of paper with dentists in mind and designing it that way. And so it's a 12 megapixel camera with a 5x optical zoom, and it's got a 49 millimeter macro lens that screws onto this, and this allows you to take, we're looking at a picture right here, a one-to-one photograph that's got some great detail. How important is it to you as a clinician to be able to take great one-to-one photographs like that?
This type of photograph is really invaluable. If you're going to communicate with your laboratory and you want to create lifelike restorations, you've got to be able to match up incisal translucencies. You want to be able to look at chroma. You want to be able to evaluate surface texture, all these minute details that a lot of times are the difference between a restoration looking good and a restoration looking great. So being able to have a photograph that is taken at a very tight macro setting for communication with laboratory technician, absolutely critical.
You know, one of the first things you notice when you pick up the C3 is how light it is. It weighs just over a pound. I was at the store the other day buying some bananas, and I noticed that like 4 bananas weighed a pound. In case our viewers are wondering what is a pound, it's about the weight of 4 bananas. And so no longer do dental assistants have to get a gym membership and go work to bulk up their forearms to hold a big DSLR, because it's literally only a pound. It makes it very easy to hold one-handed. In fact, it's even got anti-shake technology, which you really don't need because of how light it is. Are your assistants happy with the weight of this camera?
Well, absolutely. So one of the great challenges with the SLR cameras, especially if you're going to be taking an occlusal view where you're standing over the patient, is that camera can get very heavy. You're trying to hold a mirror in a certain position, you're trying to hold this camera, the SLR up to your face, and I've heard of instances, I've never seen it, but I've heard of instances where the SLR can be dropped and it actually becomes a tooth extracting instrument when it's dropped onto a patient's dentition. That's never a good day in the dental office.
Can you charge for that extraction, by the way?
In fact, you can.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Yes, good. It's a very specific code. But I'll tell you, so the nice thing about this, if you have a smaller hand assistant, and females have a lot of times smaller hands than males, but if you have the challenge of a smaller set of hands, trying to hold an SLR camera with one hand becomes very challenging. So The nice thing about this, again, it's about a pound, 4 bananas, as you say. I'm going to go test that out.
All right.
But it makes all the difference in the world as far as the ergonomics and also being friendly with your wrist.
Because the goal would be the dentist needs to know how to do the photography themselves, what the good photographs look like, how to correct a photograph that's not perfect. But the goal would be to be able to delegate this once the dentist has mastered it. And I know that I used to hear my assistant complain all the time about the weight of the camera. And I think when you don't hear complaints, you know that you're onto something good. So you actually teach at the Dawson Academy. You teach dentists, and I know you have an assistant class too. How do you teach them to use this camera? Are you teaching them specifically how to use the Shofu camera?
Yeah, actually at the Dawson Academy we have a checklist, and we're really big on checklists. So we have 21 specific photographs that we use not only for before and after pictures, but most importantly for treatment planning. And each of these 21 photographs has a very specific need in the treatment planning process. So in addition, we also have a checklist on the back side of it where we can go through the different settings that you need for the lens, the different mode that you want to have on the camera, and it even shows you when you need to have the macro lens on there, when you need to enter the camera into mirror mode, so that way you're taking really good, beautiful, consistent photographs. And most importantly, on our checklist on the front side, you can see an example of exactly how you want that photograph to come out when you're finished. Because if you take a photograph but you aren't getting the information that you need in it, then it's not really doing you much good.
Right.
And there's nothing worse than sitting down, starting to go through your treatment planning on a large restorative case, and you find out that the information that you need in your photograph, it isn't there.
I love checklists. I have a checklist for doing crown and bridge prep. Sometimes dentists laugh at me saying, why do you need a checklist? You've been a dentist for 30 years. Well, but I was noticing yesterday, sitting on the plane to fly down here, the two pilots both had a lot of gray hair. They have a checklist too, because they want the plane to make it all the way to Charlotte. I don't think there's any reason to be embarrassed about using a checklist. I think it's a sign of intelligence where you want to know that you're doing all the steps correctly. And I love that it's Shofu specific. So if they come and take the class with you, they learn on the Shofu, and then they get to take this home and have this as a reference when they get back to the office.
The fastest way to make a mental mistake is to do something habitually. And that's why pilots always use a checklist for every single thing that they're doing, because people's lives hang in the balance of a simple mistake.
Right.
Not putting the landing gear down, not having your thruster set at a certain level, accidents happen.
Right.
So dentistry, luckily, it's not quite as serious, but it's still, we want to do a good job, and we want to make sure that we don't make silly little mistakes, because those usually become costly.
I always wanted to put my prepping checklist right on the patient's bib and then just like check it off as I go down after doing the occlusal reduction, but I thought I didn't want to have it that
You
obvious.
get tired of paying for shirts and
Paying for shirts when the Sharpie goes through. So I did practice inside of a lab for 15 years. I was always amazed how few of the anterior crown and bridge cases actually had a photograph sent in with it, less than 5%, which drove the technicians crazy trying to match teeth. One of the things that I like about the C3 is, if you look at this picture here, this is just a shade taken in the parking lot with the patient kind of taking their fingers and holding it up. But they also have something called the isolate shade mode. And this is what that looks like. And so this is the perfect kind of image to be able to send to a technician so they can really see the nuance of the tooth without any other colors. Is this a feature that you find useful?
Absolutely. And even if you get a shade tab in there as well, the ability for them to really match the hue, the value, the chroma, it just becomes a little bit more precise when you take out the kind of background that you're getting from the color of the gingiva.
Would you ever send your laboratory an impression for a crown, an all-ceramic crown on tooth number 8 without sending them a photograph? I mean, they'd be insulted, wouldn't they?
They would, yeah, because they want to do a good job.
Of course.
Our laboratory technicians, they're desperate to do a good job for us, and a lot of times they're hamstrung by the fact that we're just not giving them what they need in support of them.
I think the single biggest thing you can do to get your technicians to work harder and longer on your cases without paying them a penny more is to send them a photograph of what they're trying to match, because now they know you care. And if you really want to close this circle, send a photograph of them with the crown in place afterwards, because all they do is work on stone models for the most part. They love seeing their dentistry in the mouth. And most of the time, dentists only send pictures when they're angry, when it didn't look good. It's like, no, you gotta give them some love as well and let them see it.
Absolutely.
You look at the camera, and because it was designed from the ground up for dentists, Unlike a DSLR, which has more nooks and crannies than an English muffin, you can see how sleek this is. How easy is this to disinfect in the real world?
You know, the camera was actually designed to be disinfected, which is different than the SLRs. They're not designed to be disinfected. So you can wipe it down with the wipes. You're not going to damage it. It's very resistant to having moisture on it, and that's one of the most beautiful aspects of it is, you know, we want a camera that's compliant with all the government regulations that are out there. I'm sure they'll think of other ones, but this one right now is compliant.
It's OSHA and HIPAA compliant, and because it was made with dentists in mind, the big touch screen on the back, you can actually operate with latex gloves on. So
Absolutely.
unlike sometimes with a phone where you need special gloves, this touch screen will work even if you still have your gloves on.
Yeah.
It's got 8 preset modes. Which means you don't have to take a master class in aperture and shutter speed to learn how to use it. You know, it's pretty intuitive based on the modes of what you want to shoot. And one of them is the mirror mode. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on your checklist.
Yeah.
This can be a challenging photograph to take with a DSLR. Like you said, you're hovering over the patient, holding a mirror. Somebody's trying to defog it with an air syringe. You're trying to get the angle of the mirror right and hold this camera. It's usually a challenging photograph. How much easier is it when you're using the C3?
Well, it's much easier. You know, earlier you were talking about the feature of the anti-shake mode, or the fact that if you have a little bit of movement while the picture is being taken, the software will remove that. And there's no greater time than when you're going to be having trembling of your hand is when you're trying to take these challenging photographs. And also, you want to make sure when you're taking these photographs, you can see the lighting in this, how equal it is, how there's no shadowing in this photograph, and that basically plays to the strengths of the camera as well.
No shadows or hot spots on that. When you look at it, for those of us like you and I who grew up with DSLRs before Shofu introduced this, we would be playing with, we all started with a ring flash, then we went to stereo flashes.
Yeah.
It got heavy, it got expensive. I love that Shofu thought of this, and they have inner and outer flashes on this, and then it's got these 4 macro LED lights that come on and help with the autofocus, but it also gets rid of the ambient light in the operatory. Most of us have the ironically named cool white fluorescent tubes, but they're actually very yellow.
Yes.
And so when you use these LED lights, which it does automatically, it gets rid of that ambient light, and you begin to notice that the color in the photographs looks the same from patient to patient, from picture to picture, and from one day to the next. Talk about how important it is to have consistency of color like that when you're doing dental photography.
You know, it's absolutely critical. I think back to the days when I first started photography in my practice about 20 years ago, and we were using SLR cameras with slide film.
Yeah,
and
Ektachrome,
yes.
Kodachrome. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! And then trying to get that film and taking photographs, and then waiting to see if it's going to come out the way you wanted to. Or,
right.
You know, it's evolved so much, and it's to see the technology kind of catch up to support us in what it is that we're trying to do. It's just, it means so much to make our life easier.
Yeah, I don't think most dentists realize that back in those days, you had to take the before photos, send them off for processing, and wait for the slides to come back before you could start the case, because you didn't want to start it if you had messed up your before photos. So
Yeah.
it really slowed the process down. One of the other things that this camera features, it's got a great depth of field for such a lightweight camera, and I wanted to show you one of the pictures taken in standard mode. What can you say about the depth of field on that picture?
Well, it's incredible, because most of the time when you take this type of photograph, maybe you have the central incisors that are actually in focus, and then you look in the second molars and they're out of focus.
Right.
Or you have shadowing back there. And if you look in this photograph, every single tooth in the arch in the photograph is in focus.
Right. It's impressive to be able to do that with a camera this light and this small, to be able to take those kind of retracted photographs and not have to worry about it. It's automated pretty much everything in terms of the focus, the shutter speed, and the aperture based on those presets, and it really does make it simple. Well, Lenny, thanks so much for welcoming us into your office today. We appreciate getting the chance to spend some time with you. And that'll wrap it up for this edition of Inside Dentistry's Product Talk. On behalf of myself, Lenny, and all of us here at Inside Dentistry, we want to thank you for your time and your continued commitment to quality dentistry.